So I don't feel too bad about missing. I put it in context with the other things that I do.
That's also important. Otherwise, you can just feel depressed.
Exactly,
and which people do, don't they?
And there's this issue of reflecting that upon yourself. I mean, the fact that you miss a note doesn't really mean that you are a terrible.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person either.
No, it doesn't. It's simply a fact of something, an issue of execution. So I like to think about it in very clean terms that way.
But this kind of detailed work, do you do that on everything you play? Then you really take, in a very patient way, you work out the movements.
Yes, definitely. Of course, just like with basic technique, that. When you're showing how to play the guitar to a beginner, or they forget very basic things. You forget how to alternate.
Yes.
So you give them something. If they're at a level where they can play Carcassi Study Number 1, for example, you will notice that their alternation is suspect. They just don't alternate well because they're at a level where this is not a natural function. Now, we, on the other hand, we can alternate better. But given a difficult situation, we also don't alternate. So we all have certain degrees. There are limits to what our basic capacities can allow us to create, and beyond that, we still have work to do.
So, I mean, for instance, with alternation, how would you actually improve that?
Well, it's basically the same situation as someone not alternating on Carcassi Number 1.
Yeah.
You can tell them, okay, for example, in a situation like that, if you're going to play dee da dee dum, so first note M, and then the next 3 notes on the third string, so you have to think 1, then 1, 2, 3, so M, I, M, I, M, I, M, thumb. So break the sequence into numeric values like 1, 3, 3, 1. Of course, we know math, so 1 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 is going to equal 8, which is our measure. Now, that is a complicated thing to think about for a beginner, because they just want to follow the rhythm of music, and but it's all means to an end. It's that's one of the things I love about playing an instrument and music. I mean, we want this. But in order to get this, we have to do this, because if by doing this, we're going to get this, and that way we get this, which is going to lead us to this.
Yes.
It's a very high, complex form of thinking. It's like basically evolution. You take a moment to reflect about why is it that we have laws? Why is it that it is wrong to kill someone? For example. All of that. If you trace back the reasons, we end up with an evolutionary principle. And so the guitar basically shows us the same thing, and so if someone and I happen into this a lot, someone who can play well, and has gotten past things like Carcassi Number 1, and they can play, say, Villalobos preludes and such things. You give them a piece like the Cathedral by Barrios, the third movement, what they have, the watch your right hand finger, and you're going to see one finger just plucking away at the So that's a violation of a principle that someone who's at a level of playing Carcassi already knows that it's wrong. But we still do it. We wouldn't do it with the Carcassi, but we still would do it with Barrios. And the reason is because the difficulty has increased. Now you have slurs, you have speed, you have the precipitous character of the piece. All of which are letting you to feel a certain insecurity and unease, and your fingers convey that uneasiness as well by just plucking with one finger. If we go through the discipline process that we took when we studied Carcassi and no, this has to alternate. Da da di da di da di da di da. Okay, then we accomplish something. And what happens is that we acquire better technique. If we run into a situation that calls for the same thing, then we already have a tool to protect it. Well, these things that I'm describing also function the same way. What happens, again, the amount of detail that I'm describing is the amount of detailed work that I have to take on at some point in my studies. And what happens is a lot of it starts to become more natural. It's another tool that you have. So you don't end up having to do this all the time anymore. It's simpler.
in very simple terms then, to actually say correct the problem with Barrios compared with Carcassi, you actually do what? Slow down, think about it?
Yeah, exactly. So you have here and that, here and this,
Yes.
you know, or here and this, here and this, you know, whichever is more apt to the situation, you know, and you know, there's always the issue of awareness. Like, you know,
Yes.
when you ask someone who also has this alternation issue, it's like, okay, play the chromatic scale in the first string.
Yeah.
You know, you will invariably see this ba 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 ba. You know, where the last note before the shift is with say I, and then the next note after the shift is going to be I as well. Why does that happen? Well, very simple, because your brain has to think, okay, I have to shift. So it stops tracking the right hand to then perform a function here, and then continues. So the brain freezes at that point, and then it then goes to the finger that it relies on the most,
Yes.
whichever that is.
Yes.
If it happens to be different from the one that you just played, that's great. But but usually it isn't. So it's an issue of awareness of facts, awareness of events that are taking place. So how do you resolve that? Well, it's quite there are a number of ways that you can use. Students respond to different ones, and same idea of interpretation of things. So one thing that you can do, okay, pa 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 pa, stop there. Okay, now what was the last finger you just used in your right hand? Okay, I used I. Okay, now you're going to move this now. So then what's the next finger that you need to use in the right hand? Oh, I need to use M. You'd be amazed at how between answering this question, I just use I and then shift, what was the last finger you used? You'd be amazed at how many people have forgotten what finger they used. But if you don't have the brain awareness to be able to resolve this problem, then you're not going to be able to succeed in creating a successful alternation. You know, now some people have a different, let's call it a more intuitive approach. They kind of set up this thing as a march. I am, I am, I am, I am. That also works, you know. And if they say that the letters out loud, or just in its middle, they will hear very clearly whether the finger was the same or not. So there are systems that we can use, you know, but they all go to the same thing, coordinating functions.
Well, so just a little final question, I think, because we have to go and eat probably.
Right.
Do you think that you would have played another instrument had you not chosen the guitar? I mean, did you choose the guitar at that? Because you seem to be the kind of person who could probably play any instrument and become a virtuoso on it.
Well, you know, I didn't exactly choose the guitar. The guitar was there at home. My father's a guitarist, and so basically we had guitars around the house. And my brother started to play the piano, and at that point we had a piano. But at that point I had already started playing the guitar. And you know, and even another step beyond that was that even then I had no direct interest in becoming a musician. I always wanted to be a doctor. You know, that was something that I always wanted to do. And even in my 20s, after I graduated from music school, I still thought about it. I just you know, because I really wanted to do it. I kind of eventually kind of gave up on that idea. You know, just from the advice of many people, friends and such. You know, but that was really my interest, and you know, a great interest. You know, but you know, and it's kind of easy to like suppose that I could pick another instrument, you know? And probably I could if I could have, you know, but you know, I don't know. It's difficult for me to hypothesize.
No, I understand.
You know?
But I was just thinking, because of the repertoire you choose, partly, you know, it's really like piano, orchestral.
Sure. Well, that's simply the result of my studies, my own studies. You know, so this is music that has contributed a great deal to our evolution in music. And
yes.
And on the other hand, this is going to lead to a discussion that we really probably don't have any time for. But there's the issue of musical bias
Yes.
in listening. You know, and musical bias means this, that we have a parameter by which we listen to something, and it's always based on prior experience.
Mm-hmm.
So once I read an article that talking about the Toccata Fugue in D minor, and the argument that they were made in order to talk about this issue of bias was that the way we know that passage is like this, and that is incorrect. Because the music says not
Yeah.
and of course, if you listen to it and you think about it from a neutral perspective, it's like, of course, that makes sense. The pressure of this line is on that unresolved note, then resolves briefly to the other one. That's what keeps the piece going.
Mm-hmm.
But then the author said this. The problem is that if you play it that way, everyone will think it wrong.
They'll think you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. And why? Because of all of the years of just hearing this one way, and so we as guitarists suffer of that a great deal, where a lot of our repertoire has been preconditioned to be understood in a very particular way. So what?